Hey there. Before you drift off, I want to take you somewhere a little darker than usual. Not to fantasy castles or royal feasts, not to knights in shining armour, but to the real Middle Ages. The part that's mostly been scrubbed out of history books. The part that smelled like rot, sounded like groans, and felt like splinters and cold stone and hunger gnawing your bones. Because if you think you could survive even one day in medieval times, you might want to think again. This isn't a fairy tale. This is survival with no guarantees, where one wrong word could get you whipped, one bad winter could starve your village, and one infected cut could be the end of you. Tonight, I'll walk you through 16 brutal truths you'd face just trying to make it through the day. Number 6? Let's just say, you wouldn't sleep the same after hearing it. If this kind of honest, shadowy history helps you relax, if you find comfort in the quiet echo of forgotten lives, then feel free to like the video and subscribe, only if it brings you peace, and drop a comment before you doze off. Tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is. It's oddly calming to know who's sharing the silence with us tonight. So pull up your blanket, dim the lights, and prepare yourself. Because what comes next isn't romantic, it's real, and it's rough. Let's begin. Hunger was a daily companion, not a rare emergency. You wake up, not to an alarm, but to the dull ache in your belly. It's not new, it's not even alarming anymore. It's just there, like the wind, like the cold. In medieval times, being hungry wasn't a crisis, it was your normal state. You might imagine peasants as constantly harvesting and baking, but the truth? Most of the time there just wasn't enough food. Crops failed, winters stretched too long, pests wiped out what little hope the fields had to offer. And when there was food, it wasn't balanced. Bread was your main meal, thick, coarse, often stale, sometimes stretched with sawdust or powdered bark during the worst seasons. Vegetables, only what grew nearby. Meat, a luxury, maybe a few times a year, unless you were lucky or skilled at trapping, and forget spices or sugar or salt in any real quantity. They were expensive, precious, sometimes worth more than gold. The wealthy dined in layers, meat on meat, honey-soaked dates, dishes served in towers. You'd chew on black bread and call it a feast. Malnutrition wasn't rare, it was expected. Children grew slowly, wounds healed badly, people aged quickly, and if a real famine hit, if blight took the barley or war trampled your fields, then it got even worse. There are stories of mothers boiling grass, of villagers eating bark, of entire communities walking into forests and never returning. You didn't ask what happened to them. You already knew. And hunger did more than weaken the body. It wore down the mind, made tempers short, made friends into rivals, made people dangerous. So you learned to ration, to plan, to hope the next harvest wouldn't betray you. And every time you took a bite, you knew there might not be another tomorrow. Hunger wasn't a punishment. It wasn't bad luck. It was life. The first brutal truth: you'd spend more of your day trying to quiet your stomach than doing anything else. And if you couldn't, you'd learn quickly. Starvation in the Middle Ages didn't wait politely at the door. Clean water was almost a myth. You're thirsty. That part's simple. But the answer? Far from it. There's a wooden bucket near the door, half full from yesterday's trip to the stream. The surface has a bit of scum on it. Bits of straw float there like tired insects. You drink it anyway, because in medieval times water didn't come from a tap. It came from rivers, wells, sometimes a rain barrel if you were lucky. But that water, almost always contaminated. There was no filtration, no boiling unless you had fuel to spare, and no understanding of microbes. You didn't know what germs were, just that sometimes water made people sick. Sometimes it killed them. Streams ran through animal pens. Wells were dug too close to latrines. Rotten meat, blood from butchering, Even corpses sometimes found their way into the village water supply. And yet, you drank it, because you had to. Wine and ale were safer, but those weren't everyday drinks for the poor. Ale was weak, yes, and common, but it still required grain, and grain meant value. You didn't waste it unless you had to. So water it was. Scoop and hope. Diseases with names you didn't know lurked in every mouthful. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid. Your stomach ached more often than not. Children died before the age of 5 at alarming rates, and many of them, well, it started with water. You'd see neighbours waste away from what they called the bloody flux. Others just curled up one night with a stomach cramp and never woke again. So you learned little tricks. Drink early, before the day warmed and the flies came. Choose the uphill side of a stream. Wait until the surface scum settled. But still, every sip was a gamble. The brutal truth? The thing your body needs most was the thing most likely to ruin it. And there was nothing you could do, because in the Middle Ages thirst wasn't just inconvenient, it was a dangerous need. Getting sick meant rolling the dice with death. You wake up feeling off, your throat is scratchy, your head feels heavy, and your joints ache. You know this feeling. It's sickness creeping in. In the modern world, you'd reach for ibuprofen. Call in sick, sip tea, sleep it off. Maybe visit a doctor. But here, in the medieval world, getting sick meant entering a lottery of pain, one where the prize could very well be your last breath. There were no antibiotics, no real understanding of infection, no vaccines, no pharmacies. Your options? A muddy poultice maybe, some mouldy bread, a prayer if someone remembered you in church. The local healer, a peasant woman who knows herbs, might mix a bitter tea from nettles and yarrow. It might help. Or not. Sometimes it killed you faster. If you were lucky, the village priest might stop by. He'd sprinkle holy water, mutter Latin, maybe burn incense to ward off demons, because that's how they saw disease, as a punishment, a test, a possession. Fevers were blamed on bad humours, seizures, possession by spirits, coughing up blood, a sign you'd sinned hard. And if your illness looked like it might spread, you'd be isolated, avoided, left alone in your hut with nothing but straw, cold air, and the rising panic of breathlessness. The worst part, no one would come near, not out of cruelty, but survival. They'd seen it before, watched it claim one after the next. Families shrank overnight, children died first, mothers followed, fathers turned to stone. You'd lie there, sweat-drenched and delirious, hoping for relief. But more often than not, it didn't come. And if you did survive, you might lose a limb to infection, your eyesight to fever, your hearing to a cough that never left. The brutal truth? Sickness wasn't rare. It was always around the corner, and surviving it was more miracle than medicine. In the Middle Ages, your body wasn't your own. It belonged to the whims of nature, and nature wasn't kind. You had no privacy, ever. You want a moment alone, to breathe, to think, to simply be. But, in the medieval world, solitude is a luxury you'll never have. Your home, if you're lucky enough to have one, is a single room. One smoky, cramped, dirt-floored box shared with everyone you live with. That means your parents, your siblings, your aging grandmother, maybe a few cousins, and yes, probably the family pig. There's no such thing as your space. There's the bed, which you share, there's the hearth, which everyone crowds around, and there's the door, which rarely shuts properly and never locks. Everything you do is in full view of someone else. Eating, sleeping, arguing, praying, bleeding, giving birth. Children are born in the same room where people die. Privacy isn't just unavailable, it's unimaginable. When you need to relieve yourself, you walk to a corner outside. If it's winter, you use a bucket near the door and toss it when the snow softens. And so does everyone else. In towns, you might find public latrines, small, foul-smelling huts built over trenches. You go shoulder to shoulder with strangers, swatting flies and holding your breath. Bathing, infrequent at best. You might wash your face with cold water in the morning, but a full bath, maybe once a season, if you're lucky and have access to a river or a borrowed tub. And even then, you're not alone. The whole family bathes in the same water, in turn. Oldest first, youngest last. The water goes from murky to black by the end. Even your thoughts aren't safe. Confess the wrong idea and it might be considered heresy. Speak too loudly in church. Ask the wrong question. Get noticed. And that never ends well. The village is small. Everyone knows everyone. Every whispered word gets carried like smoke. Never seen, but always smelled. The brutal truth? You are never alone. Not when you sleep, not when you cry, not even when you pray. In medieval life, privacy isn't lost. It simply never existed. You could be punished brutally for almost anything. You step outside your home one morning, you say something careless, a comment about the weather, a joke about the Lord's tax collector, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, the harvest wouldn't stretch this year. The wrong person hears you. And just like that, your life changes. Because in the Middle Ages, justice was sharp, public, and terrifyingly fast. There are no defense lawyers, no trials like you imagine today. Guilt is assumed, punishment is swift, and pain? That's the point. Maybe you're just a gossip. Maybe you walked across someone's land at the wrong time. Maybe your neighbour accused you of stealing a chicken, even if you didn't. Doesn't matter. Justice is often handed down by a man who can't read, but who remembers the law by how many fingers to remove for each offence. You could be flogged in the village square, beaten until your back runs red, not in private, not in shame, in front of everyone, to teach a lesson. If you're lucky, the punishment ends there. If not, they might shackle you in stocks for a day, or 2, or 7, rain pouring down, children throwing clumps of dirt and worse at your face, no food, no sleep, just aching muscles and the endless laughter of strangers. And if your crime is considered serious, you might lose a hand, a nose, an ear, branded with hot iron so everyone remembers what you did, even if you didn't do it. In some places you could be executed for stealing bread, hanged for hunting deer in the Lord's forest, drowned for suspicion of witchcraft. And forget justice for the poor. Nobles could pay a fine. You'd pay in flesh. The brutal truth, your freedom was never really yours. It belonged to the moods of those above you, to the gossip in the market, to the old man who remembered your father's insult from 10 winters ago. And in a world without forgiveness, a single mistake could haunt or end you. In the Middle Ages, punishment wasn't rare, it was routine. And your best defense, stay quiet, stay invisible, and pray no one points a finger. Winters didn't just test you, they hunted you. There's no word for cozy in your world. Winter comes early, and it doesn't knock. It barges in like a drunk uncle with fists full of wind and spite. The air slices through your clothes, not because you're outside, but because your walls are thin, your roof leaks, and your firewood is wet. You huddle near the hearth if you even have one. The smoke doesn't go up a chimney, it fills a room. Your eyes water, your throat burns, but at least it's warm. Somewhat. You pile on layers. A coarse wool tunic, a second-hand cloak patched with old sackcloth, maybe animal furs if you're lucky. But the cold still finds a way. There's no central heating, no insulation. And blankets? You share those, usually with people, and sometimes with lice. When night falls, it gets worse. The fire dies. No one dares burn too much wood. You need to stretch it until spring. So you sleep in shifts, curled like a comma, trying to preserve body heat. Your breath turns to mist. The water in the cup beside your bed freezes. Your fingers go numb, and then there's the food, or the lack of it. By February, the stored grain is low. Vegetables are long gone. The salted meat smells sour. You boil thin gruel. Again, stretch a bit of stale bread across the day. Maybe you chew on tree bark or dried weeds to keep your stomach from cramping. Frostbite claims toes. Pneumonia comes like a shadow. Slow at first, then suffocating. The village loses someone every winter. And if your roof collapses from the snow, you fix it, or you freeze. You pray for a thaw, but thaws bring floods, and floods ruin what little food you manage to protect. Winter isn't a season, it's a predator, one that waits outside your door every year with ice on its teeth. The brutal truth? You don't survive winter in the Middle Ages by enduring it. You survive it by fearing it, by preparing all year long, and still by knowing you might not make it. You'd go your entire life without seeing a real doctor. Something's wrong with your leg, a sharp pain just below the knee. It started 2 days ago and now it's swollen, red, hot to the touch. You limp through your day, trying not to let anyone notice. Because in your world, getting medical help is about as likely as spotting a unicorn. There are no clinics, no hospitals as you know them, no general practitioners. Doctors do exist, but they're reserved for the rich, nobles, royalty, those who can afford someone trained in ancient, confusing texts filled with more superstition than science. You have the village healer, usually an old woman with hands like bark and eyes that see more than they should. She'll crush dried herbs, blow on a wound, maybe mutter a chant under her breath. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it makes it worse. For a fever, she'll bleed you, cut your skin and let the bad blood flow. For stomach cramps, maybe powdered bone. To cure coughing, a poultice made from fermented sheep's urine and garlic. You hold your breath and take it, because it's all you have. Broken bones are set with splints made from branches and cloth. Teeth are pulled with pliers heated in fire. Surgery, if it can be called that, is done with no anesthesia, no sterilization, and no second chances. Pain is part of it. Screaming, expected. Infection, almost guaranteed. And mental illness? There's no word for it. If you're melancholy, you're lazy. If you hear voices, you're possessed. If you wander or cry too much, you're cursed. Or worse, a witch. Even childbirth, something so common and natural, is a gamble. Many women don't survive. Many babies never breathe. There's no way to know if it'll go right until it doesn't. So, you rely on luck, faith, and strong roots steeped in mystery. The brutal truth. You live every day one misstep from disaster. A cut, a cough, a chill in your bones, and when that day comes, you don't call for a doctor. You call for someone to hold your hand. You couldn't read, and that was dangerous. You hold a scrap of parchment in your hands. It could be a decree, a list of rules, a warning, a fine, or your own death sentence. But you wouldn't know, because you can't read it. You never learned. You never even expected to. In the medieval world, literacy isn't just rare, it's sacred, the domain of monks, scribes, clergy, and nobles. Reading is seen as a mystical gift, and writing even more so. For you, a peasant, those marks on paper might as well be stars in the sky. You never attended school. There isn't one. Your letters were never taught. Books were never shown. They were chained to monastery walls, one per village, if at all. Your world runs on oral tradition. What the elder says becomes law. What the priest preaches becomes truth. What the taxman claims becomes your burden. And you have no way to argue back, because without reading, you're powerless. A single forged document could take your land, A noble's accusation could never be checked. A contract you don't understand could make you a serf for life. You might not even know your own age, your own history, your family's lineage lost after a single generation of silence. Names change, events fade, your entire life is undocumented, unofficial, erased before it begins. And don't think you could secretly learn. Reading as a peasant is suspicious. Why would you want to read? Who taught you? Are you questioning the priest? Are you a heretic? People have been burned for less. So instead you memorize. You pass stories from mouth to ear, generation to generation. Your father tells you where the field lines fall. Your grandmother teaches you prayers. Your neighbour knows which herbs to boil for fever, but if they die before they pass it on, it's gone. Just gone. The brutal truth? Knowledge isn't just power in the Middle Ages, it's control. And when you can't read, you're always at someone else's mercy. Even the truth could be written down, right in front of you. And you'd never know it. You ate to survive, not to enjoy your hungry again. Not the kind of hunger that makes you glance at the clock and wonder what's for dinner. The kind that sits heavy in your belly all day, a gnawing ache that never really goes away. You eat, yes, but food in the Middle Ages is not about satisfaction. It's about not dying. You start your morning with bread, always bread, not soft or warm, not slathered in butter. It's dark, dense, made of rye or barley or whatever grain didn't rot in storage. There's no yeast, no ovens like you'd know. Your bread is flat, dry, and full of grit. From the grindstone, from the dirt, from time. Your teeth suffer. They crack. They fall out. Sometimes the bread has mould. You scrape it off and eat it anyway. Midday, if you're lucky, you might have pottage. A thin, watery stew of root vegetables and herbs. No salt, no spice, just warmth and filler. Meat, rare, reserved for holidays. A chicken, maybe, if one stopped laying eggs. Boiled, bone and all. Milk is for making cheese. Cheese is for keeping when the milk sours. And butter is a luxury traded, not eaten. You drink ale, even at breakfast, because water isn't safe. It flows from rivers that also carry waste, disease, and death. You eat with your fingers. Plates are wooden, sometimes just a slab of bread. There are no forks. Knives are shared. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve if you have one. And you never eat alone. Meals are communal, loud and short. Everyone eats fast. Food is rationed. Some winters the rats eat better than you do. And if the harvest fails, you stretch the flour with sawdust. You chew leather. You pray. The brutal truth, you don't live to eat. You eat to live. And sometimes you wonder if it's even worth it. Because in the Middle Ages, hunger is a companion you never quite get rid of. Fire could save you or destroy everything. There's a single flame in your home. It's your light, your warmth, your stove, and your comfort. It's also your greatest threat. The fire in your hearth is never allowed to die, because restarting it is hard, painfully so. There are no matches, no lighters, just flint, steel, and skill, so the coals stay buried in ash at night, protected like treasure. If they go out, you walk to a neighbour's house, beg for a glowing ember, and carry it back in a clay pot. But that tiny flame, your lifeline, it's also your executioner. Your home is made of wattle and daub, sticks, straw, mud and thatch, dry, flammable, waiting for a spark, a tipped candle, a falling ember, a rush of wind, and suddenly your entire life goes up in smoke. There are no fire brigades, no water buckets at the ready, just screams, panic, and the sickening hiss of wet earth turning to steam. If one house catches, others follow. Whole villages can burn in a single night. And the flames don't just take buildings, they take food, clothing, tools, family. You're left with nothing but blackened earth and the smell of ash on your skin. Even when fire stays in place, it scars. Children get burned. Women lifting pots over open flame lose eyebrows, arms, sometimes entire faces. Accidents happen every day. And the pain? Excruciating. There's no relief, no cream, no anesthesia. A burn could get infected, turn septic, kill. But still, you depend on it. Without fire, you freeze. You starve. You sit in darkness. So you kneel before it with both respect and fear. You feed it like a god. You speak to it in whispers. Because in the Middle Ages, fire isn't just survival. It's a coin flip between life and ruin. You were always dirty, and that was normal. You wake up itchy. You went to bed that way too. Dirt isn't something you wash off. It's part of you. A second skin made of dust, sweat, smoke, and grease. It coats your hands, your neck, the backs of your knees. You don't notice it anymore. Not really. No one does. Cleanliness isn't a virtue, it's a myth. Bathing is rare. You don't have a tub, you don't have soap, you don't even have enough water. Water must be drawn from the well or river, carried in heavy wooden pails, and every drop is precious. Why waste it on washing? Most people clean only what others can see. Face, hands, maybe the feet if it's Sunday. Hair? Washed once a month, if at all. Combed with fingers, tied back with string, or hacked short when lice get unbearable. Clothes? You wear the same set all week, all month, sometimes all year. A shift or tunic that becomes part of your body. When it gets stiff with grime, you hang it outside to air. Lice, fleas, and ticks are part of daily life. You pick them from your scalp, your sleeves, your bedding. You learn to crush them between fingernails. Everyone does it. Your bedding, if you have any, is stuffed with straw crawling with insects. Blankets never dry completely in winter. They smell like mildew, mold, and cold breath. The village smells too, of animals, of sweat, of waste tossed into the streets, of tanneries, smoke, cabbage, and bodice. It clings to you. It becomes you. Perfume? A distant fantasy. Deodorant? Unheard of. Even saints were said to stink. And if you get a cut or a rash, there's no antiseptic. Just spit, herbs, or mud. Sometimes it heals, sometimes it festers, and sometimes it kills. The brutal truth? You live in dirt, you breathe it, you sleep in it, and when you die, you return to it, fast. Because in the Middle Ages, clean is not a goal. It's a rumour passed down from someone who once visited a monastery bathhouse. You never really slept through the night. It's dark, the fire has gone out, the wind scratches against the door like a feral dog, and still you're awake. Not because of a nightmare, not because you want to be, but because that's just how it is. In the Middle Ages, sleep doesn't come in 8-hour chunks, it's fragmented, fitful, uncomfortable. You lie on a straw mattress, stuffed months ago and now half decayed. The straw pokes through, itches. Sometimes it smells of mould or mouse droppings. You pull your cloak tighter. There's no pillow, just a bundle of old fabric or your arm folded beneath your head. Next to you, your family, all of them, sleeping in the same room, sometimes the same bed. You hear their breath, their coughs, their shifting limbs. Privacy, forget it. Sleep comes in 2 parts, first sleep and second sleep. In between is a strange silent hour. Some rise and stoke the fire, some pray, some whisper, or visit neighbours, or stare into the dark. Scholars centuries later will call it segmented sleep. You'll just call it normal. You're never truly rested. You rise sore. Muscles tight from the cold, neck stiff. Dreams, if you had them, already gone. And if you're a farmer, you're up before the sun. If you're a servant, up even earlier. No snooze button, no mattress, no curtains to block the dawn. Just the rooster's cry or the rhythm of bells from a chapel far off in the woods. And that's assuming you got any sleep at all. The baby cried. The rain dripped through the roof onto your face. The wolves howled near the edge of the woods, or maybe you just lay there, listening to the wind, thinking of what might go wrong tomorrow. The brutal truth. In the Middle Ages, rest isn't restorative, it's survival. A pause in the labour, a borrowed silence, and tomorrow it starts again. If the church didn't approve, you could be punished, or worse. You kneel. You don't know why exactly, only that you're supposed to. The priest speaks Latin. You don't understand a word. But when he raises his hand, you bow your head. When he walks past, you cross yourself. When he says, Amen, so do you, softly, afraid of saying it wrong. The church is not just a place of worship in your world. It's the spine of your entire existence. It tells you what's right, what's wrong, what happens after death, and sometimes what happens before it. To question that, to step outside that rigid framework, that's dangerous. You pay your tithes, whether you can afford to or not, a tenth of your crops, your earnings, sometimes even your livestock, even if you barely have enough to feed your family. Because to withhold from the church isn't just greed, it's sin. And sin must be punished. The priest knows everyone. He hears their confessions. He blesses their marriages, their births, their deaths. He decides what's forgiven and what must be paid for, sometimes publicly. If he says your field is cursed, it is. If he says your wife is sinful, she is. And if he says you're harbouring thoughts too worldly or dark or proud, then you might find yourself standing in the square, arms bound, shame painted on your skin, or worse. Because across Europe, the church doesn't just guide, it rules, it brands, it excommunicates, it condemns. If you say the wrong thing, if you speak against doctrine, if you question a relic, or refuse a fast, or suggest that saints might not bleed miracles, you could be flogged, imprisoned, burned. Even whispers of heresy are enough to ruin a family. Generations lost to suspicion. You learn early to obey with your eyes down and your mouth shut, to nod when spoken to confess what you're told you've done wrong, even if you haven't. The brutal truth? In the Middle Ages, faith isn't always hope, it's fear, wrapped in incense, echoed in hymns, carved into stone. You don't choose your beliefs, they are chosen for you. You could be punished for crimes you didn't commit. You hear the boots first, mud-slapping leather coming fast, then the shouting, the accusation, the cold, sudden grip on your shoulder. You didn't do anything, you swear it. But none of that matters now. In the Middle Ages, justice isn't blind, it's brutal, and it rarely listens. There are no lawyers, no appeals, no court dates penciled into calendars. If someone claims you stole a chicken, or insulted a noble, or consorted with something unholy, that might be enough. You're dragged into the village square where judgment doesn't come from evidence but from reputation, rumour, and who's standing on which side of the crowd. You try to explain. Your voice shakes. No one hears you. Instead, they might test your guilt with fire or water. Trial by ordeal. You're handed a red-hot iron and told to carry it 3 paces. If your wound heals clean, you're innocent. If it festers, you're guilty. Or you're bound and tossed into a river. If you sink, you're pure, but probably drowned. If you float, you're a witch. It doesn't feel like justice, because it isn't. Sometimes your punishment is a fine you can't afford. Sometimes it's a branding iron, or a day in the stocks, wrists and neck locked in wood, with rotten vegetables hurled at your face. But sometimes it's worse. A missing loaf of bread could cost you a hand. A harsh word about a lord could land you in prison. And prison in the Middle Ages isn't a sentence. It's a waiting room for death. Dark, damp, disease-ridden. No light, no food, no record of when or if you'll ever get out. And if the crime is severe, or just unpopular enough, the noose waits, or the gallows, or the fire. And even if you're innocent, the stain sticks. People cross themselves when you walk by. They whisper. They avoid your home. You wear guilt like a second skin, something you never asked for but can't ever shed. The brutal truth? In the Middle Ages, truth isn't what happened. It's what people believe happened. And belief spreads faster than facts ever could. You could be owned without being a slave. You rise before the sun. You work until long after it sets. You sleep in the same clothes you plough in. And yet, none of it belongs to you. Not the land, not the harvest, not even your time. You are a serf, not a slave, they say. You have rights, technically. You can marry, have children, own a goat maybe, but you can't leave, can't change jobs, can't say no. Your body is tied to the land, and the land is owned by a lord. He lives in the big house on the hill. You've seen him once, maybe twice, when taxes were collected or judgment was passed. You don't speak to him. You bow, nod, back away, because everything you touch, the fields you till, the tools you use, the walls that keep the wind off your children, they're his. You owe him labor, owe him grain, owe him loyalty, and if you don't pay, you lose more than your dignity. He can take your home, your animals, your child if he pleases. And if you try to flee to start again in a new village, you're hunted like a criminal, dragged back, punished. Freedom, for you, is a rumor, a song sung by the travelers who pass through and don't stay, a word whispered by old men who say they once knew someone who bought their liberty. But it's not for you, not in this life. You are born a serf, you die a serf, and your children, they will too. The brutal truth. In the Middle Ages, not all chains are metal. Some are made of dirt, obligation, and the silence that follows when no one dares to speak out. You are free in name only, but owned in every other way. You were born knowing you'd probably die young. You open your eyes to the same sky as yesterday. That alone makes you lucky, because in the Middle Ages life isn't a journey, it's a gamble, a short one. You're born into a world where death isn't rare, it's routine. It begins with birth. Mothers die often, babies die more. There are no hospitals, no painkillers, no sterile instruments. If you survive the first days, you're not safe. Your world is full of things trying to kill you. Bad water, rotten food, wild animals, a fever that won't break, a cough that settles deep and never leaves. There's no such thing as childhood the way we know it. You start working as soon as your hands can hold something. You don't play. You mimic your parents, bend your back in the fields, carry wood twice your size, go to bed with sore arms and empty stomachs. And if you reach 10, that's a milestone. If you make it to 20, you're strong. If you reach 30, you're tired. And if somehow you live to 40 or 50, you're ancient, a village elder, a walking ghost with no teeth and bones that crack like old branches. There's no planning for the future. There's no retirement, no old age in comfort. You don't dream of what's next, you just try to wake up again. You learn early not to cry when someone dies. You learn to dig graves with numb hands, to wrap loved ones in cloth and place them into the ground before the wolves come sniffing. Death is part of the rhythm, not a tragic end, just another step. The brutal truth? In the Middle Ages, life is a candle in the wind, and the wind is always blowing. You were never meant to live long, only long enough to suffer, serve, and be replaced. And no one wrote your name down. No one carved your story in stone. You just disappear. So now you know. 16 brutal truths. 16 quiet shadows behind the storybook walls of the Middle Ages. No quests, no dragons, no golden goblets. Just the daily ache of survival, of waking up hungry, of working until your hands split, of fearing the night, the cold, the rumors, and the people you couldn't trust. Maybe it's strange how something so harsh can feel. peaceful. How the soft crackle of imagined firelight, the whisper of wind through a thatched roof, and the simple rhythm of old lives can help us slow down. If this story brought you some rest, if it settled in your chest like a warm blanket on a cold night, then I'm glad you stayed. Go ahead and like the video if it helped. Subscribe if you'd like more quiet stories like this. And drop a comment before sleep takes you. Tell me what time it is where you are. It's always comforting to see who else is listening from the dark. Maybe someone from Norway or New Zealand, or just the next town over. We'll never meet. But for a few moments we were here, sharing this quiet piece of history together. Rest well.